Kong 2022 ISPA Congress, people is certainly our core. Especially when the COVID-19 is ravaging the world, the first impact cost is that the interactions and communications between people are restricted. Post-COVID-19 trauma is a challenge to audiences as they return to public spaces and performing arts venues. This panel session will delve into the value of arts and healing, with insights in the potential of the arts as a powerful vehicle for reconnecting the local community and the world. Tissa Ho, Executive Director of the Hong Kong Arts Festival Society Limited, will lead in Grace Chang, Siba Raman, Govind Rubin to share their expertise in arts programs that have built a community-wide rapport.
Hello everyone, it is such a pleasure to join you. I hope you've been enjoying to connect beyond the 2022 Hong Kong ISPA Congress so far. I've been blown away by so many of the remarks and comments and conversations. But first of all, I really need to congratulate the people who've just received awards. They are heroes and idols, and I heartily congratulate each and every one of them. I'm with three other really remarkable people in this session. You've already heard their names. I want to say just a little bit more about them in order in which they will present, they will make their presentations. The first is Govind Rubin. I first came to be aware of Govind through his work. This was a production called Skin, which was audacious beyond imagination. It was about human trafficking. And it was done in containers in which he locked the audience after taking away their personal belongings. And if you think of a town in Malaysia in which you persuade the city councillors to allow you to lock people up, to close the roads, and to use containers for purposes for which they were never intended, I mean, that gives you an idea of what that means. I think that's about 7 years or so ago, and Govind has gone on to win awards in Europe, Asia, America, and Australia. And I love that I can count him as a very good friend. The other friend is Grace Chang, who is also a neighbor sometimes in the building where I work in Hong Kong. She is Director of Arts in Hospitals and also associated with Arts with the Disabled, which is a strategic partner of the Hong Kong Arts Festival in our No Limits project, which we work with, which we present now, I think, in its fourth edition with our sponsor, the Hong Kong Jockey Club Charities Trust. The third speaker is a remarkable woman who is a new friend and I hope will be a continuing one. Like many of these relationships that we make at ISPA, Zeba blew me away with the story that she has to tell. She is director of the Building Bridges program at the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art, operating under the umbrella of the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. She is a grant-making director, supporting work in the United States, working with Muslims to increase mutual understanding, well-being, and to build stronger communities. Those of us who have even the slightest understanding of what that means in the United States right now will understand the importance and the enormity of the work that she is doing. So you will hear from each of them. I'm going to now pass the time over to Rubin, who has something rather special in store. As usual with Rubin, over to you.
Hi, Tissa. Thank you very much for that introduction, and hello to everyone. Can I get my slide up, please? Yes, thank you again, and it's such an honor and pleasure to be talking on this panel. And can I get slide 2 up, please? So I run a company called Terry and the Cuz. It is Terry and myself. We are not cousins, just two guys who have a very deep passion for comedy. We are storytellers, and we believe that stories can be told in many ways, which is why we also sort of work across genres. We are part of many communities, and in each of those communities, we are regarded very differently, I guess. In Kuala Lumpur, where we're from, we are often ostracized and scorned. We've been labeled amateur and irresponsible. In Australia, we've been labeled rule breakers and innovators. And in America, where we've recently started making work, we are regarded as delightful and funny. Slide 3, please. Now, arts, healing, and reconnection of communities. Look, I'm very honored to be invited to speak on this panel. And I guess a few months ago when I was given this topic, for some reason or another, I had a very strong first reaction. You know, like when you play that game, you know, think of the first thing that you can think of when you hear a word like, you know, milk, chocolate, peanut, butter. So when I heard the words healing and reconnection and community, the first thing I could think of was Carrie Bradshaw. Can I have slide 4, please? So I couldn't help but wonder, although a bit dated now, there was something about Sex and the City that really jumped at me when I thought of the words healing, connection, and community. So I started rewatching the series in that time, and I have the box set. It's the whole Manolo Blahnik sort of box. And I kept watching until I found the right scene to help make my point. Slide 5, please. Look, it took me 6 seasons and 7 episodes before I found this right scene. It's the one called "The Post-it Always Sticks Twice." You know, and this was, you know, because I had to also find a scene that was sort of content friendly with regards to the conference. Slide 6, please. So in this episode, Carrie has just been broken up with by a post-it note by this guy Berger, who she was already having serious doubts about. But the real trauma for Carrie is that Berger breaks up with her first, beating her to the punch on a post-it note. Charlotte, on the other hand, had very big news of her own. She's now engaged to the recently proposed to by her former divorce lawyer and now boyfriend, Harry. So the girls meet for their ritualistic Sunday brunch to reconnect and talk about what just happened in their lives. Slide 7, please. I was very excited to actually, you know, play this scene. But unfortunately, I was told by the Congress organizers that there were some copyright issues with HBO because this thing would eventually be played out again. So with no other choice, I reached out to my fellow panelists to ask if they would be ever so kind to do a live scene read with me, and they said yes. Slide 8, please. So for this exclusive once-in-a-lifetime reading, Tisa Ho will be reading for Carrie Bradshaw. Grace Chang will be reading for Miranda Hobbs. Slide 9, please. Shady from the organizing committee will be reading Samantha Jones, and I will be reading Charlotte York. Thanks, guys, and you can go to the panel reading format. Okay, so Sex and the City, they posted Always Sticks Twice, Scene 6, Episode 7, Season 6, Episode 7, Scene 2. Interior, restaurant. Carrie has just been broken up with by her boyfriend Berger and is about to sit down with the girls to tell them the news. Unbeknownst to everyone else, Charlotte also has some news. Harry, her former divorce lawyer, now boyfriend, has just proposed with a very, very big diamond ring.
Boy, do I have news.
So do I. I didn't want to say anything until we were all together, but Harry and I made up and he asked me to marry him.
Oh my God, congratulations.
That's great.
Look at that ring.
I know. He had it made based on the one Richard Burton gave Elizabeth Taylor.
Well, it is fabulous.
Even more fabulous than your first one.
So Carrie, what was your news?
Oh, Berger broke up with me on a post-it.
On a post-it?
Yep. Read it and weep, my friends.
I'm sorry, I can't. Don't hate me. The motherfucker's concise.
First of all, I thought you were gonna break up with him.
Yeah, I was, and I should have. But he said that he wanted to try work things out, aka leave in the middle of the night.
A post-it? That's infuriating.
Yeah, I remember when breaking up over the phone was considered bad form.
I once was broken up with a guy's doorman. I'm sorry, Miss Hobbs. Jonathan won't be coming down ever.
I miss having a doorman.
Are you going to call him?
No, I'm not going to dignify his behavior with a response. I'm not even going to leave one of those angry answering machine messages. Hi, it's me, you're a dick. Sure felt good saying it right now, though, even to you.
Well, that's what we're here for.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry too. That relationship was a complete waste of time.
No, it's never a complete waste of time. I mean, even in the worst relationship, you always learn something.
You might not want to say that to a woman carrying a loaded post-it.
But Kerry, everything happens for a reason, even if you don't know what it is yet.
That's such a bullshit.
It's not. Look at me. If I hadn't married Trey, then I would have never gotten divorced, and I would never have met my divorce lawyer, Harry, and I wouldn't be engaged now.
Paper covers rock.
Kerry covers Charlotte's diamond ring with Berger's post-it. The end. Slide 11, please. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll come back to that scene later as I summarize my discussion. When presented with this topic and trying to understand our collective trauma from the pandemic, I started researching other literature on the topic. I came about this study in the Australian Journal of Emergency Management, authored by clinical psychologist Dr. Rob Gordon. Slide 12, please. The study was written in 2004 and had sample findings from victims of earthquakes, bushfires, and even catastrophic events like September 11 and the Bali bombings. To understand trauma, the study says we must first understand, 1, what happened, COVID-19. 2, the effect, well, widespread social disruption and death. And the affect, well, sort of life sucked for a while and our social fabric was affected to the core. Slide 13, please. So in order to survive the impact, we as a community tend to do certain things. And this has been studied, which in retrospect, looking back at the study and looking back on what happened the last 2 years, we all really kind of did. We were all highly aroused instinctively. We banded together very fast. Think March, April 2020, all the initiatives we started online. Then further along, we sort of debonded and isolated ourselves and binge watched Netflix. And if you look at the Netflix share prices between May and June 2020, it sort of really made sense when we sort of became isolated. And then after that, we tend to rebound. Every arts council and organization in the world suddenly wanted to invest in tech and online initiatives and collaborations. We desperately tried to build links again. Slide 14, please. However, then the world started to tackle the pandemic in different ways, some more affected than others, therefore cracks would start to form. And then, of course, there was the vaccine, which was also being used as a political device. QR codes, checking in, policing, vaccine certificates, border closures were all suddenly part of our lives, uniting us in smaller pockets of like-minded individuals and dividing us from people who kind of didn't quite agree with how we looked at it. So there's a clear shift between the coming together to suddenly all of us forming these behavioral patterns. There was a lot of, my way is better than your way. Nationalism started thriving again, and the wonderful coming together early on had suddenly sort of really disappeared. And up until today, we continue to carry these feelings and trauma within us, some better than others, but of course, it's there. And I don't think we really will know what happens or what the true effect of COVID-19 is for at least another 2-3 years or many years to come. But what we do know is what we did, how we reacted, and that will form our collective history. Very similar to, I guess, people post-World War II or World War I. Slide 15, please. So what can the arts do when it comes to connecting the community and the world? What can organizations do? What can venues facilitate? What can festivals promote? Slide 16, please. According to Dr. Rob Gordon, there are methods that have helped. These are actually methods that have helped victims of collective trauma. We can lead community formation, your local theater, your festival, bringing people together. Our venues can facilitate social bonds, make your community feel welcome in your space. Normalize conversations about everything pandemic related. The more we discuss, the more we understand each other's perspectives. These will actually help form a common reality within our community. It's like how my grandfather used to talk about what happened to Indians in World War II, how everyone just ate tapioca for 2 years. So these are sort of things that really bring us together and bring us back as a community, I guess. And probably, where we all stand out as arts practitioners is that we can do all of the above in a safe environment or space that actually helps preserve the differences, complexities, boundaries, and identities of our communities. Slide 17, please. And then, with regards to the social role of the arts. Now, this is sort of, I guess, why I had that first strong reaction in the first place. Slide 18, please. And I thought of Sex and the City and that particular episode, The Post-it Always Sticks Twice, and, asked this very esteemed panel to help me with the scene. Slide 19, please. Because there's something about Sex and the City that kind of really got to me, and I kind of further delved into studies online, and I found a study by then PhD student Cindy Royale from the University of Texas, Austin in 2003. You see, Sex and the City uses a narrative structure to portray the complex issues faced by Carrie Bradshaw, played by Tisa, as she tries to write her weekly column. This particular episode was about a traumatic breakup on a Post-it. The show explores diverse relationships of powers that the characters inhabit. It often depicts various situations and how the girls band together either to solve it or to make peace with it. It also illustrates very successfully, which is why the show is so successful, the struggles continually faced by each character. Slide 20, please. So coming back to the social role of the arts, I just replace the word characters from the study with community. What we do, if we do it well, is to help with the healing process. We help people make sense of the issues. Our role isn't to solve, but to help the community come to terms with what has happened, offer opinions, points of views, but most importantly, is to be there as an outlet that the community can access to heal. Very much like what all the other girls do for Carrie in that scene. Slide 21, please. Yes, that's kind of basically my talk and my presentation. And, what I actually think the role of the arts is at this particular moment, and also very many moments in the past. We're here, we offer perspective, and we are a big part of how the community can heal. And I hope that little scene kind of gave you a bit of a sense of potentially at least what I think the role of the arts is. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Govind. Thanks for framing it so beautifully for us. And within that frame, I want to now invite Grace to make her presentation and to give us some very specific examples, actually. Grace. Over to you.
Thank you.
我估唔到幾廿歲仲可以學畫畫，仲畫得自己都覺得幾滿意咯。我哋今日呢堂特別啲，要喺呢個花園度啦，第一次出嚟。其實我唔識講嘢，不過我覺得好舒服啦。呢個公園好咁多顏色嘅植物都好少見咯。
enjoy 呢個情景咯，因為第一次嚟呢個環境裏邊，令到人個心情好舒服。我張畫係自己心裏邊諗出嚟嘅，一筆一落都係我自己一手畫出嚟。
畫畫咧，即係好似提升咗自己嗰個視力啊，好似提升咗好多嘢咯。
最好多啲活動俾我哋玩，因為我哋幾廿歲咧，其實都除咗去飲茶啊、行公園啊，咁好少有呢啲，仲可以學畫畫，仲可以識好多朋友啦，係非常之好。睇唔睇到我呢幅畫咧？個藝術家就係趙耀芳我啦，好滿意啦，係老師逐啲教識我哋咁樣畫。
阿 Sir 講得非常清楚明白，所以我哋咧一學就學到啦。畫完呢張畫之後，我永遠都會記住阿 Sir 嘅。
好欣賞你哋咧，每一次翻嚟就好投入啦，好好學啦，同埋咧互相支持、互相鼓勵，一齊咧咁用心咁畫一張畫。每次畫完張畫出嚟之後咧，其實咧我係第一個咧會覺得好震撼㗎，因為我都冇諗過大家啊原來咁有創意啦，咁多諗法啦，同每一個畫出嚟咧都咁好喎，咁所以多謝你哋。
多謝晒，好
辛苦你，辛苦你。
我有冇㗎？呢張相會唔會俾我㗎？
呢個唔係相嚟嘅，所以俾唔到你。
I think this video actually really talking about what Art in Hospital is. So this is one of our projects with elderly. Next slide, please. So who we are? We are actually from a form of artists, art administrator, designers, and also art therapists. So what we aim for is to help the people in need with arts. We believe arts is healing, and we believe the power of arts. Just like Govan said, we hope art can be an outlet for them to heal. So this is also our aims for people in need. For this project, next slide, please. I would like to introduce a bit what we are doing right now. Although actually, because of the COVID, hospitals are closed. We cannot do many things, but still we are having a lot of workshops through internet, like Zoom or other things. But what I love to is to have them face-to-face and laugh together and paint together. From this slide, you can see what we are serving. We are serving people with chronic illness and also those who will be staying long at hospital. Next slide, please. A bit of our service: mural painting, workshops, publication, education, everything. Next slide. So this is one of our projects I would like to introduce to you. We work a lot with elderly patients in hospital. These are some of their works, their first time painting. And look at this, they are so beautiful. Next slide. And this was a project back to 2017. And we served a group of patients with dementia and some with or without intellectual disabilities. What we want to work with them was, do you know about your neighborhood? So the patients start to share what buildings that they usually look, what are the landmarks. And then this is one of the landmarks that they paint. Next slide, please. And then usually we would have only patients to paint, but because when we are talking about neighborhoods, we're talking about family. So we also invite family members to join. Some are really siblings, some are domestic helper, some are couples. Some were couples, yes. And then particularly, I want to talk about this pair. You can see on the left is the mother, and then on the right is the daughter. And then they paint together. They try to find the road across that neighborhood and everything. Next slide, please. So they discuss. Next slide, please. And then they share. When they share, I still remember what the daughter said. She said, "I've never seen my mom paint. I've never seen my mom painting with smile." And then she started talking about the neighborhood, all the story, not just about the space, but also about what the siblings been, where they've been to, or all the little story that about the family. So when we interviewed the daughter, she started to cry because she saw another way of her mother, and then that touches her, and she admit that actually I've never been really talking heart to heart with her mother. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, we actually form in a big group, so you can see there's a lot of people together. And with the help of hospital staff and also our workers, so you see actually they just paint, and then sometimes they forgot they are in hospital. They just paint and then they share, and then some they laugh, and then just like the last video, and one of the patients said, "Oh, I met new friends. I'm so happy." And also another one from the video said, "Now I'm an artist. I'm not a patient." Next slide. These are some of the paintings they create their neighborhood, which is Finland. Okay, and other project I would like to share actually is back to 2005. Next slide, please. I don't know if you see this painting, what you can think of. This painting actually is from a 12-year-old boy who was suffered from the tsunami in Sri Lanka. So you can see how desperate he was. Next slide. We then went to Sri Lanka in 2005 with a group of artists, therapists, and volunteers who are trained in Hong Kong, and then worked with a group of children organization in Sri Lanka, serving a group of children, like hundreds of children. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes. And then we create story, like this one. I know everyone will know the 3 little pigs, but we changed to 3 little sheep because, you know, pigs is because of the religion's reason. So we changed it into 3 little sheep. And then that was a workshop of including storytelling, singing, dancing, everything. Next slide, please. So we learn from them, learn from the children. We ask them what songs that you usually sing, and then we learn. And then we recreate the song together, fitting in with Cantonese, I mean what we are talking, and also with their languages. And we create together and make us play. Next one. So finally, we made 3 little sheep play together, and then what we want to talk about is how we embrace if because with the story, two pigs, you will know your home will be destroyed and everything. But now, no. With all our efforts, with the community, with everyone's efforts, you can build and you can conquer. So after the workshop, what we do? Next slide, please. We went to the beach. Actually, it was the beach that they have been long avoided. Some children lost their parents because of the tsunami. Some, they are scared of all the waves and everything. Next slide. So we gather some of the children and then beside the beach and we share, we talk, and then we embrace. Next slide, please. Then we start to invite them. We went there to the sea, hands by hands, and we start to encourage them to touch the water. Next slide, please. Some, they're so happy because they have been avoiding to approach the sea, but some, they just scared. They just stand alone. They don't want to walk there. Next slide, please. And then one of the parents, he just went to the sea, in the middle of the sea, and then welcome all the children's approach. Because for this village, actually, most of the parents or most of the livelihood is fishing. They have been long waited to go to the sea again. So with the encouragement of some, with the encouragement of this parent, they start to walk step by step. Next slide, please. So these are some of the reflection and some response from the children after they really step into the sea and return with these beautiful paintings. So just like I want to quote again, Covens, arts is really an outlet for the needed one. So while we are waiting, because in Hong Kong our services right now is all stopped, but what we are doing right now is to have a lot of study research, and we really hope to go back to the hospital or to the needed one, face to face, and then working in arts together. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks for the beautiful images and the wonderful smiles. That just brings to life the content of the frame that Govind had set up for us. And I love that you've brought up narrative and stories and character, because our next speaker has a very specific narrative and character to tell us about. So can I pass it to you, Zeba?
Thank you very much, Tisa, and thank you, Govind and Grace, for your incredible presentations. I'm honored to join you in this conversation about trauma, about the process of healing, and yearning for connection. This is the essential human story, and this is the story of each one of us. And it's also a story of our continued transformation and that indomitable human spirit that seeks to be resilient. I'm talking to you, I've arrived here very, very recently in Charleston, South Carolina, which is a city that's divided deeply by race. It's a city which had the largest slave market in the United States in the 18th and 19th centuries. It's the city in which a white supremacist named Dylann Roof in 2015 massacred the parishioners of the oldest African-American church, which has been and continues to be deeply engaged in the civil rights movement, the Mother Emanuel Church. And it's a city in which very recently, about a year ago, 36 bodies of African-American enslaved people were excavated by mistake by a real estate developer who was going to pave them over. And when the community found out, they insisted on a reburial of them with all the honors and the dignity that they deserve. And it's a city in which an arts project about an enslaved man who was sold, who was kidnapped from West Africa, a Muslim scholar, and sold into slavery right down the road from where I am right now, Gadsden's Wharf. And it's his story. It's a story of Umar. And he wrote the sole existing enslaved person's autobiography. And it begins with this: I am Umar. And he wrote in Arabic. So I'm going to ask tech team to pull up my slides and show the first slide to tell you a little bit about this story. It's a story about great trauma, Umar's trauma. He was in his late 30s when he was kidnapped from his village in West Africa in what is now Senegal. And he made it across the very traumatic journey to Charleston. He was sold, as I said a moment ago, he was sold to a very, very brutal slaver. And he escaped and was caught and thrown into jail. And from there, in the jail, he covered his jail walls, his cell walls, with writings in Arabic. And nobody knew what he was writing. They thought it was gibberish. But he became a curiosity. And then he caught the eye of another slave owner who bought him, the Owen family. And they were kind, and they understood that he was quite a unique person, that he was educated, and let him write and let him live on, and relieved him of the really arduous, the really brutal duties of somebody who's enslaved. Omar ibn Said, next slide please, was on that one of the last slave ships in 1807. Slavery had been, the trade had been outlawed at that point, and so there was a desperation to get as many Africans over and sold as possible. And he arrived on one of the last ships at Gadsden's Wharf. Next slide, please. And he was sold, as I just said. And here he is, here's Umar. So this is how it began. And his journey is quite remarkable. It's a reminder of, again, the theme that we have today, which is trauma, and then healing from it and resilience. Next slide, please. Here is some of his writing, his manuscript, which is in Arabic, is now at the Library of Congress. It has been translated and digitized, and it is available for anybody to look at and read for free, either in English or Arabic. Next slide, please. What I wanted to also tell you is that in all these years since his manuscript was discovered, many, many scholars studied him and studied his manuscript. And they were primarily white scholars, and they applied, obviously, their lens to his story. And in it, they also took issue with some of the way in which he wrote the Arabic and so on. And then that prompted, next slide, please, an interest more recently in the excavation of his story and the retelling of it by African American scholars and artists to really bring alive Umar's story, to bring it to life. And next slide, please. And that's exactly what Rhiannon Giddens, the Grammy Award winner and also a student of opera. She studied opera at Oberlin College before she took up her deep interest in telling untold stories. Rhiannon Giddens and Michael Abels then set about, at the request of the Spoleto Festival USA here in Charleston, to write an opera about the life of Omar ibn Said. And that, Rhiannon says, took her back to her roots. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about a personal story, a journey that I took with Omar in this way, that in the 1990s, before I came into philanthropy, I was in the field as a producer and a curator of the performing arts. And I met, through a mutual friend, a Muslim, an African-American Muslim collector, Derek Beard, who had saved the Omar autobiography by buying it from somebody. And he really had an urgency about getting his story told and having the manuscript go into safe hands and have that story, his story, amplified. And he asked me to help him. And I made him a promise. And I said that I would help him. I wanted to. I'm Muslim too. And I read up a lot about Omar after that. And the internet had just come in. And so I studied up a lot. And I was determined, but nobody was ready to take on his story until about 4 or 5 years ago, when Nigel Redden, the Spoleto Festival head, came into the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Arts offices and said that he had a project he wanted to pitch us, which is a medieval Persian morality tale that he needed funding for. And I was with the CEO of the foundation at that time, Ed Henry, who is now retired, and Nigel in the boardroom, the big boardroom. And the meeting was called to a close by Ed Henry, and he said, "Thank you very much, Nigel. We'd love to support. And the Building Bridges program will certainly be supporting this project." And he was about to get up, and I stayed seated. And I said, "Nigel, have you heard of Omar ibn Said?" And he said, "No, who's that?" And Ed was giving me the side eye, what on earth are you doing? And I stayed seated. I just said, Omar was sold into slavery right down the road from where you sit at the Spoleto Festival. He's a scholar, a Muslim, and up to about 40%, 30 to 40% of the enslaved, the 400,000 enslaved that were shipped to the United States, about 40% were Muslim. That's 1 in 5 of those enslaved were Muslim. And Nigel was quite astonished, and I have to give him credit because he was the first person who said, "Please tell me more. Where can I learn more? Who can I talk to?" And so I fed him everything I had, including scholars' names and so on. And to bring the story to a close, next slide, please. It's a promise that I feel we have kept to Derek Beard, who died just as the Library of Congress bought the manuscript of Omar. So Derek did know that it passed into the hands of the Library of Congress. He doesn't know, and I hope that it gets across to him that while he's up the road, that in fact this opera is going to open tomorrow. There are all sorts of wonderful educational programs surrounding it, including the teaching as part of the curriculum of 8th grade students here in Charleston and soon to be other parts of the United States about Omar's story and the story of the enslaved. And I should say that Nigel himself told me that he was transformed by this project and his entire team at the Spoleto Festival. Nigel told me that he's now, in his retirement, involved with a project which is also in Charleston, where very recently these 3 dozen enslaved bodies were dug up by a real estate developer who was going to build on top of it, a big building, and the community then protested. Nigel then also got involved in it, and now he's deeply involved in making sure that there's a monument built on that sacred site. So this is the power of the arts. Next slide, please. I believe that's the final slide. And this is what we do at the Building Bridges program. It's one of our lead strategies, is to really amplify untold stories that are authentic and representative. And we believe that stories can be transformative. We are a storytelling species. And it is stories that define us and help us to make sense of our lives and the world around us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eba. That is totally touching and moving. And you remind us again of the importance of narrative, of character, which we are so good at in theatre, in presentations. I think nobody better than us, certainly not in the political realm, but it is in the arts that we're able to tell stories that are nuanced, that can contain tensions and contain authentic voices and depths of understanding. Now, we're a little bit short of time because these stories, these presentations have been so amazing. So I'm going to go straight to one of the questions that have come in and to ask each of the panelists to contribute to this one. Would you have any advice or sharing of initiatives to program creators and artists for future plans in view of the post-COVID trauma, which is a global issue or problem? I bear in mind totally what COVID said when he framed this for us at the beginning, which is we don't really know yet. I mean, look at us now. We're in a digital Congress, right? So we're still living through it, and it will take some time before we know, as in Zeba's case, where all the where all the bodies are buried, and we know what we're dealing with. But still, of and in the moment, is there anything that you would like to share? Would you think that any group or any age of any group of people have priority in this? Who would like to? Well, Govind, you've been quiet for a bit. Can I put you in the hot seat and ask you to share first? Does this relate to any projects that you're doing?
Look, I think one of the things Terry and I did as soon as COVID hit. Well, it was sort of something we wanted to do just before COVID. So we kind of went on this, decided to take a break from the arts. And we decided to do this in January after the last ISPA conference, January 2020, and then COVID hit. So weirdly, the fact that we wanted to take a break weirdly coincided with this global pandemic. But when we wanted to take a break, one of the reasons for doing that was to actually recenter ourselves and actually just think again and try to actually figure out what we want to do and how we want to do it. And then, of course, I think with COVID, it sort of really sped up the process of the thinking process. And I think my guess is in about 3 or 4 years, we're going to come to another golden age of presentation of because we've had artists incubating for the last 2-3 years. We as a society, as the world, we've gone through this crisis together, the first global crisis possibly since the last World War in terms of scale. And I think, how it's affected me is we have, I guess, gone back to the basics, something that I always sit down and wonder, as a lighting designer myself, is how effective traditional shadow puppetry is. in a day and age with moving lights and LEDs and all sorts of technology, when you sit down under a tree and see one candle and a puppeteer and some music, it somehow transports you to a different world. And I think, like Zeba said, I think it's stories. We've been telling stories since the caveman times, and I think it is in a way that we heal. So to kind of come back and answer that question, at least from my point of view, I think it is the collective coming together. I think in my presentation I talked about the Rob Gordon study about actually that's what we do. We sit down, we talk, we share stories, and I think artists, presenters, festivals are going to naturally come to this place where avenues for storytelling will happen in different ways and form, and that will bring the community out and together again. And it doesn't have to be super complex. It's actually really simple because, deep down, it is what brings, it's what unites us, this passion to tell stories. So I think that's everybody should, be creating space for this to happen.
Thanks, Govin. That's storytelling, narrative, the narrative voice, character. That's so central to what we do. How we do it, where we address these stories and these narratives are always open questions. And there's a question that's just popped up, which is, I love this. It's such an ISPA moment of connecting. This one is for Grace. Is there a chance for other arts groups to work with you in the future on what you're doing?
That's definitely. To us, I think this is the right time for us to really gather all the artistic talents together. Not just visual art, not just performing arts, it's just all kind of us together. We need to get together and not to brainstorm, but to contribute all your artistic talents and see what we can do. Because I've been working in the hospital, and then I recently just talked to some medical professionals, and they told me one quite tragic incident is at the geriatric ward, all the elderlies, because of the COVID, because they have been closed in the hospital, so their motor skill and everything actually is getting down. And they all the medical staff have been working with us, actually urge us is to see if there's anything that we can do, but not going into a hospital. So right now we are actually in discussion with every possibilities. So if there's any art group that in Hong Kong would like to talk to us, would like to work with us, let us know.
That's wonderful. This is a real connecting moment. I love it, and coming together, which we began with in Govin's wonderful skit of friends coming together, then a larger group coming together, and then of course Zeba's story of moments of history and significant social events coming together in this form, which is narrative. Now, as we do the work that we do, there's another important dimension that is crossing, our collective consciousness now, and this is the next question. There's an imperative to respect sustainable arts presentations and touring, which means that we may have to find very different ways of working than we used to. So should that imperative also extend to what we're talking about, to the healing process, and to what we can do together as a community? What is your take on that? It's a very quick, maybe 1 minute or so answer from each of you, if possible.
I'll start.
Thank you.
And say that, of course, that it's actually a fantastic opportunity for just that, for really consciously looking into what the silver lining is in this horrendously traumatic era that we're living in, and how we can go further, how we can push ourselves, and to really look at consciously what brings forward well-being so that we can all thrive. And what we have learned in these past 2.5 years of sequestration is doing so with new technologies. So we've all become pretty good with Zoom and other such platforms. And what's interesting now is what can we do with that to be more and more connected? Because we have been physically apart, but what can we do to create connections and intimacy? That's what we're really seeking, is intimacy. And that does bring us well-being. I'll stop there.
And that's actually, I'm going to jump in now because that's actually a great introduction to the next question, which is that bonding seems to be an important dimension of healing. Bonding seems to be, and being together, that you were talking about, Zeba, is a really important part of that process. And yet, we're doing all of this via digital means at a distance. Is that a contradiction? How do we overcome this? I hear what you just said, Zeba, which is that we need to find the ways to bond. Does this digital realm actually pose division, or is this a tool? In the last few days, we've been hearing quite a lot about initiatives in the digital realm, about new ways of doing the arts, even in this pandemic era. Is this actually another hurdle that we will have to somehow overcome, do you think? Or is this something that is a tool? Which way do you see it? Grace, maybe? Sorry, Govind? You first?
Sorry, I was just, when the question came out, I just thought of this amazing story that happened in Melbourne. It happened at this point where people were checking in, and they, where we have to check in with the QR code, and there was this point where everybody who checked in had to show their vaccine certificate, and people were still confused on how to get it as part of their check-in thing. And so at the Abbotsford Convent, a friend's venue, they had set up this thing, and a guy came in and he checked in, but the thing didn't respond. And so when the crew came to help him, they realized that across the 2 years of the entire pandemic, he hasn't been checking in, but been taking pictures of the QR code. So he had in his phone literally about 3,000 different pictures of QR codes. And when I thought of that, and when my friend Colette was telling me the story, I mean, we had a good laugh, and I think, but that is a human story, and it is unexpected. So I don't think anything at all is a hurdle. I think it is part and parcel of what we do and what we know how to do now. I think about the fact that my father now knows how to use his QR code in the camera. He knows how to Zoom. He knows how to. So the audience has become more sophisticated. We still want intimacy and all of that, but I think the technology and what's happened over the last few years is already part and parcel of who we are. And we'll need to consider this when we make work or when we do stuff, because we can juxtapose it, we can use it, we cannot use it, but I don't think it's a hurdle. I just think we've just become a bit more sophisticated, that's all.
Right, I would like to share also, because right now, during the pandemic, we're still conducting workshops. We need to learn, not just ourselves, also the patients. I mean, the elderly patients, they also need time to learn. So for us, I think we need patience. We need time. We need to learn, and the result is actually the same. It's the same. Right now, we are doing Zoom, and the elderly, they know how to use iPad. They know how to share even. So I think for them, I remember there's one elderly talked to me and said, right now I can use iPad to share things with my grandkids. So I think this is also wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. That has been inspiring and thoughtful and remarkable. And to sum up, I don't quite know how to sum up, except that perhaps to go back to Govind's, popular entertainment, and to say, maybe to twist a saying of Yoda's. You remember, he said, do or not do, right? There is no try. I think for us, where there are no guarantees in anything that we do, there is only try. And we can make the world a better place, a more humane place, if we just try. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you continue to enjoy ISPA and ISPA Hong Kong 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you.